Welcome to Looking Into Cultures. I'm back here with Frank, who's looking very revolutionary today.
Cynthia, welcome back. You brought more footage of your trip to Cuba.
Yes.
And now, did you ride one of these
Yes,
bicycles? What is a bicycle taxi? What is it called?
BC Taxi.
Okay.
And the horse carts.
And you did go on one?
Oh my gosh, yes. I went in BC taxis in Havana, in Camagüey, and horse cart only in Santa Clara. And they use them to commute. I loved it.
It looks like a great way to travel.
Yeah.
Like a throwback in time. So what made you want to trace the revolution of Cuba in your itinerary? What kind of piqued your interest about it?
Yeah, okay. Well, you know, when I lived in Peru in 1985, I had a friend. He was Peruvian-American, had lived in Miami, and he told me, you know, in Miami, you can't listen to Silvio Rodriguez. We're going to hear a little bit of his song in a little bit.
Wow.
Silvio Rodriguez is a Cuban singer-songwriter who supported the revolution, and so it was banned in Miami.
Okay.
And so that was one thing. And then the other thing was when I lived in Miami, when I got back from Peru, I moved to Miami, and I lived in Little Havana, and I didn't realize it, but I was living among many people who had come over on the Mariel boat lift, which is the Marielitos. I was living among them, and my best friend there was an old Cuban man whose son had brought him over there, but the daughter-in-law didn't like him, and so the son got him a studio apartment. He had to live alone, and he couldn't go back to Cuba, and it was very, very sad. He was old, and he wanted to go back to Cuba, but they'd given him an exit visa.
Wow, so you learned a lot about the people you were there.
Yes.
And they treated you very well, but they were very open with you about their feelings about the country.
Yes, in fact, people were almost confessing to me. People were taking me aside and, you know, sotto voce, they were telling me their complaints. It was pretty awe-inspiring. I'm a complete stranger, and they're pouring out their hearts to me about their discontent.
Before we go any further, you've got this book here and this mannequin, which I think a lot of people are probably saying, that looks a little, they're wondering what that is. So
yes.
what is the book?
Okay. Well, the book is a book I bought in Santiago de Cuba, and it's the diary of Che Guevara in Bolivia, where he was captured and then executed. And I wanted to read a book in Spanish, and I wanted to go to Che's mausoleum. So I bought it, and I read it while I was there, and I finished it just before I went to Che's mausoleum, which was a very, very moving experience. Now, they had an ideal. The revolution had an ideal of the new man, el nuevo hombre, that they were going to create a new society and a new man. And so I decided this is representing the new man. It's got a beret on like Che Guevara, and the face is sort of featureless, meaning, well, this is a new start. This is a fresh start.
What was the cause of this? Why were they so eager to have a revolution? I don't understand.
First, don't you want to hear about my entry into the country?
I would love to, sure.
Okay. Well, could we have the map of Cuba, please? Okay, so see, look at the far right-hand side at the bottom.
Okay.
That's where I flew to. I did not fly to Havana, which is on the other end of the island. I flew to Santiago, and you can see it's a little bit sort of near Guantanamo Naval Base. And that is also the area where the revolution began. That's where Fidel, with his men, landed their boat and started the revolution in the mountains called the Sierra Maestra.
Okay.
And so that's where I wanted to come in. Could you take the map off? And when I came to that, I was the only foreigner on the plane. Everybody else was Cuban. And when they stamped me in, I mean, they were absolutely mystified. Like, they were smiling, they were amused, they were puzzled.
Were you wearing this outfit? No?
No, I don't know what I was wearing, but I mean, it was like they never practically, at least they didn't seem to have seen a foreigner in a long time.
Okay.
And they were so nice to me, and it was wonderful. But it was very low key and almost no people. The plane, it was just one plane.
Wow. Okay, getting on with the revolution, what was the reason for this uproar? What caused this revolution where they were so unhappy that they started fighting?
Okay, what caused the revolution? We have to go back to the Spanish colonialism. In 1868, they had a war in Cuba. They wanted to be free of Spanish colonialism. Okay, that didn't succeed. And then in 1898, they started another revolution, which then the Americans stepped in, and it became the Spanish-American War.
Okay.
And then the Spanish were defeated. I believe Cuba was under a protectorate for about 4 years, and then Cuba was declared independent. But it basically remains sort of a neo-colony of the United States because the United States dominated its economy. Let's go to the mid-20th century, the 1950s.
Yeah.
Fulgencio Batista made a coup in 1952. And he took over. And this was not, this dictatorship was essentially supported by the United States because of all the economic, investments they had in Cuba. But it was totally corrupt because I think you watched that scene out of The Godfather 2?
I did. There was a lot
What'd you notice about that?
A lot of casinos, a lot of prostitution, and a lot of gambling.
And the cutting of the cake?
The cake, yes.
Yeah, so what about the cake?
Well, the cake was, they were giving away portions of Cuba to different parts of the
Right,
mob.
they were just dividing up Cuba. Here's this piece for you, this piece for you.
Yeah.
So Batista was getting kickbacks. The mafia had a big convention in Havana in 1946, and they owned a lot of the businesses in Havana. This was the Havana Riviera. It was the playground of the world's elite. It was very corrupt, and Batista was making millions, putting it in Swiss bank accounts. And so, I mean, this is capitalism at its worst.
Yes.
And wouldn't you want a revolution? I mean, when the people are suffering, they don't have anything, they're illiterate, and this is going on in Havana, and they have no control over their lives. So this was a hotbed of the revolution.
So was there an event that started this revolution where, what happened to get the revolution going?
Okay, well, first I went to, my trajectory, as I showed you where I landed, Santiago.
Yep.
I wanted to go there first because it started there, but before it actually started, Fidel Castro in 1953 attacked the army barracks in Santiago called La Moncada Army Barracks, and he was captured and sentenced to 15 years prison. But he only served 2, and then Batista gave Castro amnesty. Castro went to Mexico, met Che Guevara and his other compatriots. They formed a plan. They bought a boat called the Granma, and they sailed by night to the Sierra Maestra, the mountains near Santiago de Cuba, and they began the rural part of the revolution. There was also urban revolutionaries, and there were many revolutionary groups. It just so happened that Fidel's group triumphed.
I see. And from Santiago de Cuba, then you went on to Camagüey?
Well, first I want to tell you a little bit about Santiago.
Okay, sure. Yeah, what was the atmosphere like there?
Okay, the atmosphere was totally strange. It felt terribly economically depressed. People were standing in line for rations. There were these special stores where they were selling cooking oil and nobody could afford it. Apparently these stores require a card with euros on them so that the average person didn't have a card with euros, and people were saying, we don't have any cooking oil. My host was he was trying to defend the situation. He was an old retired lawyer who had worked for the government all his life. And the first morning I got my coffee and he said to me, no hay leche, there is no milk. And then I found out that they're only giving milk to children 6 years and under.
Wow.
So the feeling of Santiago was they have a harbor, no activity. I didn't see any boats moving. I didn't see a fishing fleet.
Wasn't like Mystic, was it? It was really
Oh yeah, no way.
Not bustling.
No, the exact opposite. It was like being under a spell. It was like everybody seemed languid, almost hypnotized. I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but just very languid, like nothing was happening.
It wasn't a relaxing feeling. It was more
well,
like...
it was relaxing
was it?
for me because I wasn't the one suffering,
Yeah.
but for them, it was like being in the doldrums. They were in the doldrums. And even one of this tour guide who tried to sell me a tour, he said, Havana does this to us. Havana doesn't want us to have tourists. Havana doesn't want us to thrive. So that was, really, I mean, they started, confessing. I went to eat in a Paladar, which is a private restaurant, and the waitress started telling me, we don't have anything. Everybody was confessing, not everybody, but many people were confessing to me their lack of basic needs being met, and it was daunting.
So you wanted to move on and go on that nice highway, which you told me about, which was...
Yes.
Are we going to get a clip of that, or is that...
Yes, right now. Can we have the clip of the highway, please?
Tu mano gloriosa y fuerte, desde la historia dispara, cuando todo Santa Clara se despierta para verte. Aquí se quedará clara la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara.
Now, that footage was on your way to Camagüey, is that correct?
Yeah, that's the highway from Santiago going west towards Havana. And of course, what does it look like?
It looks like a country road.
It's a rural road. Yeah. I went on that for hours and hours and hours. It's very potholed. There's almost no traffic on it. What did you see on there?
I saw a lot of trees.
No, but horse carts.
Horse carts,
The horse carts, yeah.
yeah.
So like you didn't see a lot of
no
cars.
one coming the other way either. Is it a one? I mean,
there was hardly anybody coming the other way.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just amazing.
What surprised you the most about that?
Well, I mean, what surprised me was that the countryside did not look under cultivation. The only thing I saw cultivated was sugarcane, and I barely saw a cow. And I realized, well, no wonder they don't have any milk because I barely saw a cow. But anyway, I took that highway to Camagüey, and Camagüey wasn't so important in the revolution, at least not the Castro revolution, but it was an area that had a lot of landowners, cattle ranches, sugarcane, and so it felt it felt quite a lot more aristocratic than Santiago. But the main thing that was really interesting there was that I went to the bus station thinking I would get the bus. It's called Via Azul. But it's run by the government. And I stood in line 2 hours, and then the guy says, you got to pay with credit card. I couldn't believe it. And I said, I'm American, I can't pay with credit card. So I ended up taking a collective taxi to Santa Clara. I was able to pay with either Cuban pesos or US dollars. The convertible peso, a special currency that tourists were once required to use, has been discontinued. This 20 peso note bears the portrait of Camilo Cienfuegos, one of Castro's revolutionary commanders. The only thing that really stood out there was that the lights went out in my homestay, and they stayed out all day long. And then in the evening, the homestay host, he was apologizing to me, and he looked really agitated, and he said, "Ya he perdido la fe," which means now I've lost faith. And I mean, it was shocking because that was obviously about the government's ability to deliver utilities, But anyway, after that, I went on to Santa Clara. And Santa Clara was the place that I wanted to get to.
Okay, why is that?
Because that's where Che Guevara's mausoleum is.
I see.
And there's one thing I forgot to tell you in the beginning was that another thing that I knew about Cuba way back was that in 1967, when he was executed in Bolivia, I saw the picture of his dead body in the National Geographic. And they say, even in Bolivia, they call him a saint, and he looked like Jesus Christ.
Really? Wow.
He looked so beautiful in death that it was like really, you thought, whom have they killed,
This quote reads, "May the hardships of these times not make us lose the tenderness of our hearts." Che, a medical doctor pledged to save lives, did not consult the tenderness of his heart when he executed those judged as traitors of the revolution.
In one sense, they idolize him still. There's statues to him down there now.
Absolutely. And I want to tell you the lyric of that song, that's a very famous song that you just saw with the highway. And the refrain of that song says, it was written after Che resigned from Cuba and went to foment world revolution in other countries. But the lyric says, you have gone, but here with us remains the clear, profound transparency of your beloved presence, Che Guevara. I mean, if this isn't, reverence, absolute
Did he bring
reverence.
literacy to Cuba? Would you say? I read something.
Sorry?
Literacy. He encouraged people to become educated.
Oh, yes, and he was a big reader. I mean, he studied Marxism. I mean, while he was in the battlefield, he was reading, Marxist tracts and ideology and stuff. Could we see the two statues of El Nombre Nuevo? El Hombre Nuevo, the new man. Okay, now you can see, this is one view, and can we see the second view? Okay. Okay, take that off, please. So this is El Hombre Nuevo.
Right.
Okay, what do you think? What do you get from this statue?
Well, I think their hope was to create a new person who would be more, not live under Cuba's reign. It would be.
But not just that, a new person, a new form, a new human that was kinder, that shared, that didn't exploit. And of course we can say, oh, now, communism has, is seen as, the most exploitative and the most repressive, and yet their ideals were the opposite, really. It's ironic, isn't it?
It is.
Could we also see the statue of Jose Marti?
Fidel considered his revolution a continuation of the 19th century revolution of Jose Marti. This dynamic statue of a Marti on a charging horse reflects the same determined advancement as the statue of El Hombre Nuevo, where Che strides forward holding the infant that represents the new man.
Equestrian statues, of course, were very popular way back in, in previous times. But, the horse is greatly dynamic. And, of course, Marti is a national hero because he really was the one who wanted revolution way back, in the 19th century. But anyway, so then I went to the mausoleum, and I finished the book the night before I went.
Wow.
So I was shocked because they executed Che Guevara in Bolivia along with his guerrilla companions, and they buried their bodies and paved it over as an airstrip because they wanted to hide it. And eventually, finally, like in the 1990s, it was exhumed. They found the bodies or the remains, brought them to Santa Clara, Cuba, and put them in this mausoleum. And since I had been reading the book, I felt like I had been there with them because it's like a big horrible camping trip where everything goes wrong. They're lost in the jungle, they're ambushed, they're fired on. He has horrible asthma, they can't find anything to eat. And then finally he's captured. So, and there's pictures of all of them. So I read it and then I went and saw this mausoleum, and all of them are in this mausoleum, not just Che. So that it was very emotional for me. But the thing was, I wanted to know what Cubans thought about him.
And what did they say?
The host in Santa Clara, he said that he was un aventurero, an adventurer. So like he didn't really a lot of people, they have kind of rethought or reconsidered how to view him, and many don't view him in a good light, whereas many still revere him, and he's considered a saint.
Do you think that's happened over time? Or,
in the town where he was killed in Bolivia, he's considered a saint. By the campesinos, the peasants. You can see on the loop that's going behind us, you will see a train car and a kind of a, I think it's a bulldozer or something. That's how the revolution was won, because Che Guevara took the bulldozer, he lifted up the railroad tracks, and the armored car that Batista was sending with reinforcements and weapons was derailed, and then they got them all, and that very night, which was January 1st, 1959, the revolution triumphed.
Wow.
They won.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there had been a coup against Batista, and he had purged his officers, so he weakened his own army. And that was a liability for him in the revolution.
Now,
so where are we?
Well, we're going to move on to Havana. You haven't talked about Havana really yet.
Oh, what about, we didn't show the clip of Che.
Well, why don't we do that right now?
Okay, can we see the clip of Che, the
Me
mausoleum?
gusta mirarlo al hombre plantado sobre la tierra. Me gusta mirarlo al hombre plantado sobre la tierra, como una piedra en la cumbre, como un faro en la ribera, como una piedra en la cumbre, como un faro en la ribera. Nada más, nada más. Alguna gente se muere para volver a nacer. Alguna gente se muere para volver a nacer. El que tenga alguna duda, que se lo pregunte al Che. Y el que tenga alguna duda, que se lo pregunte al Che. Nada más, nada más.
So there was another statue. What did
Yes.
you think of that statue?
That was great. Now, I also noticed the railroad car, so this is all part of
That
retelling
was
the
the
history.
car that
yeah,
he,
how the revolution was, how they
exactly.
won. Yeah.
But what did you think of the statue of him with the rifle?
I saw that there was the belt. Was that the one with the belt, with the men coming out of the belt?
Yes, the men
Yeah.
coming out of the belt buckle. No, that's on the Nuevo Hombre statue. It
Okay.
shows his belt buckle with men coming
Yeah.
out, and that he's giving birth to the
new
new
man.
man.
The new man.
Yeah.
And then there
so-
was this. What was his slogan that he? Because I saw it was in Spanish, but what does it mean?
All right. So hasta la victoria siempre. It means until victory.
Always.
Always. You know, and so that, and I want to tell you something about the lyric of this song.
Mm-hmm.
It's really beautiful. It says, I love to look at a man standing firmly on the earth, like a rock on the summit, like a beacon on the coast. And I think this sort of heroic, this heroic portrayal of a man is sort of, these songs were all written for Che Guevara,
I see.
by the way. I have a CD that's nothing but songs for Che Guevara, both after he died and after he resigned from Castro's government and left Cuba.
Why did he leave Cuba?
He left Cuba because he wanted to make world revolution. Latin America still had many dictatorships, and so he also went to the Congo in Africa, and then in Bolivia he was trying to make a revolution, and he was captured.
What did he think about individualism?
Oh, okay. He thought individualism was really bad because, it's sort of like the idea of collectivism, meaning everyone helps everyone. Society is for the greater good of all.
Right.
And that the individual takes its strength from the group. Whereas in the other, like say in our society, it's like the group takes its strength from the individual.
I see,
The
yeah.
individual comes first. So obviously in communism, just from the root of the word commune,
Yeah.
it's communal, it's collectivist. So he did not think highly of individualism at all. He thought
see.
it was pernicious.
So,
yeah.
Okay, well, after the revolution, now, how did this affect relations with the United States?
The United States has had an embargo on Cuba since 1960, and it's kind of going back and forth, and they also prohibit any foreign subsidiaries that are, I guess, organized in the United States to trade with Cuba. And at first they allowed nothing. Then they allowed just food and medicines, which are considered humanitarian. But this says down with the blockade, which they call the embargo. And what do you see on the right and the left? The two arms.
I see an American and an Israeli flag
On which side?
on the right.
Okay, and so it's downward. So abajo el bloqueo is down with the blockade.
Right.
And what do you see on the left side?
Looks like they're trading, and they're trading with other countries.
Yeah, the left side, they're trading with other countries. And in the UN, every year, the UN is voting to stop the embargo.
Right.
But it's always blocked by whom?
By America and Israel.
Like bugs caught in amber, these cars were imported to Cuba in the decade before the embargo began.
And this was in Havana. It says, "My family is better without the blockade." So the government uses the blockade in some ways as an excuse for its own defects.
Yeah.
But in fact, it hasn't been effective at all, the embargo, to change regime, to cause
And that's what
regime
the hope
change.
would be. That's why.
Yes. So in Havana, I went to the beach and I saw these people fishing, but they didn't have boats. They had rafts made out of styrofoam.
Let's take a look at that.
Yes.
Estoy buscando melodía para tener como llamarte. Quien fuera Ruiseñor, quien fuera Lennon y McCartney, Sindogara y Violeta, Chico Buarque, quien fuera tu trovador, corazón, corazón oscuro. Corazón, corazón con mundos, corazón que se esconde, corazón que está donde, corazón, corazón en fuga, herido de dudas de amor.
Wow, that's a very simple boat they use, and they caught quite a bit of fish.
Well, you can see the neediness.
They don't have the resources we
extreme
have
neediness.
here. Who is Castro's successor? What is the present day government?
Okay, the present day government is a Castro-groomed president and first secretary of the Communist Party. His name is Miguel Diaz-Canel. And in 2021, there were huge protests. He jailed a lot of people and did a lot of repressions. There was a lot of migration because of that. And in 2022, the U.S. Border Patrol intervened with about 200,000 Cubans
Really? Wow.
leaving, en masse, leaving Cuba. And then, so,
That remains
the
our current
situation.
policy in the United States. Is
That's our current policy. But there were two presidents who were lenient, and that was Carter and Obama.
I see.
And Carter established interest sections in both countries, and he also promoted the Mariel boat lift, which brought Cubans out.
Yeah.
And then also Obama established an embassy in Havana in 2015 on my birthday, which I think is significant for some reason. And but I wanted to say two last things. When I was in a BC taxi in Havana, suddenly the guy's pedaling, I'm behind him, and he goes, "We want the United States to invade Cuba." Well, I was flabbergasted.
Yeah. Well, they're happy with the way things are going here, the economy, and they want that type of prosperity. They want to have the same quality of life that we
Right, but I
enjoy
mean, this
here.
is what I mean about confessions.
Yeah.
I mean, people saying this to me, and I thought that's all the U.S. needs is to invade another country, you know what I mean? And then finally, I want to show you the rose, please. A man gave me this rose in Viñales at the homestay, and he told me the day before, I was leaving, so he gave me a rose, but the day before he confessed to me, unsolicited, that he had just gotten out of prison he was in for 11 years. For killing an ox.
Oh, you told me
Could
this,
you take
yes.
the slide off? But can you imagine?
Yeah.
Like if you killed somebody's cow in this country, how much jail time do you think you would get?
You might get a suspended sentence where you had to do some community service.
You think
At
that's
the, at the
all?
ver- At the very most. I don't think you'd get much punishment.
Like out in Texas, if you killed somebody's cow?
Well, they
you think
might-
it'd be that lenient?
I don't know. I don't know what the laws are down there.
I don't either. But this guy, he was hungry for meat. He went in the middle of the night and killed an ox, but somebody, I guess, ratted on him because the ox belonged to the government.
Right, yeah.
11 years.
He
know.
had to serve 11 years in
11
jail.
years in prison.
That's very sad.
And yet he was still this warm-hearted, humorous man who plucked a rose from his patio and gave it to me as I was leaving it.
Yeah.
It was very, very touching.
Resilience. I mean, they really have, it's forgiveness and just
Yeah.
moving on and,
Yeah. And and like I went to a tobacco farm and they told me there that the government takes 85 to 90% of the profits.
Wow.
So it's very hard to,
make a living.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that, is there any last question or comment you'd like to make?
Do you want to go back?
Of course.
You do.
Yes, of course.
well.
But I have so many other places I want to go, But anyway, thank you for watching Looking into Cultures. Thank you, Frank, for
You're
being
welcome.
so revolutionary today.
My pleasure.
And for becoming a new man.
Oh, well.
Today you are a new, fresh being.
Well, yesterday was the first day of spring, so I think it's time.
It is, for all of us, absolutely. Thank you so much, and please come back next time for another episode of Looking into Culture.